So thank you so much for joining the webinar this evening. I'm Rebecca, I'm Head of Communications at Autistica. And for those that don't know the charity, Autistica is the UK's autism research charity, and we exist to give every autistic person the best chance of a long, happy and healthy life. We fund research and we shape policy and work with autistic people to understand their needs. And we also work in partnership with others to ensure that that research really changes lives. And a big part of that is sharing the latest research and the latest evidence-based practice. And that's what these webinars are all about. And we've run quite a few now, sort of related to coronavirus and to help people through these difficult times. So as restrictions with COVID continue and don't seem to be easing up anytime soon, we thought it would be good to cover some of the sensory issues that we know are affecting many autistic children. And we know that a lot of those sensory issues are driven or made worse by some of the anxieties that the children have around the pandemic. So really pleased that we can invite Mayuri today to share her expertise with us. Sadly, our other speaker, who is a speech and language therapist who works with Mayuri, has been unwell, so she's not able to join us this evening, but Mayuri is going to cover all of her points. So Mayuri has more than 10 years experience as an occupational therapist, primarily working within neurodevelopmental disorders in a variety of settings, including inpatient hospitals, private clinics, schools, and in the community. And she's won a number of awards for her work as well. So she's founder and director of Kidspire OT, an independent occupational therapy service. And she works at the Holmwood School in North London as a lead paediatric OT. She's also a qualified yoga teacher and embeds yoga practice into some of her therapy. So I'll hand over to Mayuri in a second, and she's going to speak for about 40 minutes. And has a few slides to go through with you, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So please, if you have any questions at any point, just add them into the Q&A function you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll cover them at the end. And if you want to communicate with us, if you're having any technical issues or have any comments, then just pop them into the chat. But I'll hand over to Mayuri now.
Thank you, Rebecca. I hope everyone can hear me and proceed. I'm just going to minimize so you can actually see the whole slide. Yeah, hopefully. So welcome everyone, and thank you Autistica for inviting me, and also all the amazing work that you do. It's just incredible to have these speakers, and I've heard some of the work that Autistica has done, and it's been really amazing support for the community. So thank you for that. So just to make a few points, is that obviously this webinar, this topic was planned before we went into our next lockdown. So I still feel it's going to be useful for you, and I hope that you can take away some points. And this is mainly from an OT perspective, so I've just gathered as many strategies and kept it as practical as possible, so you can take those and it might stimulate for you to apply those in your own circumstances. Now the slides are going to be a little bit condensed because I just wanted to make sure you get as much information as possible. And I will hope to talk through as many things as I can, but it will always be there on the slide, so they're accessible to you whenever you want. All right, okay. So the plan is to have very specific sensory issues which might have come up in the last 8 months and 9 months of the pandemic that we are all experiencing. So we're focusing on wearing face masks or face coverings, and we're thinking about support strategies. Obviously in UK, under 11 are not needed to wear face masks or face coverings, but just by observing and in the schools and young people that I've worked with, I've seen that a lot of primary kids have been wearing face masks and coverings. So I thought it will be quite useful to go through all those kind of strategies. The second one we're going to look at is the washing of hands and think together about the support strategies which can be used. We are also going to look at minimizing touching on face or mask, things and other people. So this is a little general, quite broad kind of point, but I really wanted it to be there because this is something which can be quite difficult because it's a natural thing for us to do. And lastly, just looking at anxiety, which might be related to sensory issues, but also generally anxiety, because a lot of times you might see that the sensory issues can get worse with higher anxiety. So we want to make sure that we are addressing anxiety and automatically sensory issues can be managed. All right, so yeah, 9 months ago, life changed for all of us, and suddenly we are having to cover our nose and mouth, not our face, at least our eyes are there. And it has obviously not just challenged the kids, but us as adults. It's been a huge change in the way we are used to interacting with other people. And seemingly it is so important that we do follow this guidance. So just this is a scenario, if a young person doesn't need to wear a mask, then we're going to start to think about all these things. And again, just emphasizing this is more from an OT perspective. Also to say that we're never going to be forcing anyone to wear a mask. So if a child is feeling particularly uncomfortable, cannot breathe, you're not going to be forcing them to wear a mask. But this is in a scenario where it's necessary and you think the child can cope or the young person can cope with face covering, then we can start to think about all the sensory components which are going to affect wearing a mask. So just to quickly run through actual masks. So obviously you want to think about your mask, you want to think the material of the mask, how it's made. Is it made at home? Is it going to be shop bought, or you're going to do a little bit of DIY and be more creative? Is it going to be breathable? Is the style of the mask having loops which go around your ear, or is it going to be a tie back, which is more like a surgical mask, which has to be tied, I think, on top and at the bottom. So just all these things to look at. Is it going to have any seams, or is it going to be seamless? Is it too tight or too loose? So all these components will really help you to kind of assess the mask itself. Now, we want to also give a consideration for the duration of time the child or the young person needs to wear a mask. So it might be that they are okay for 5-10 minutes, but after that, they cannot really have the mask on. So you do want to think, are you hoping for them to wear a mask for an hour, or for a visit to the supermarket, or going to school in a cab or a bus, and whether they can have mask during the entire length of time. Then, of course, we're going to look at the individual sensory needs. So a little bit of sensory profiling. You want to know whether they already have some sensitivities, especially around face area or around their fingers. They don't like certain materials. They don't like smell. So you do want to assess those individual needs. And lastly, also thinking whether the child does require something to chew on, whether they have a need to lick, or they have a tendency to touch their face or put their fingers in their mouths. All these things will matter. And we then need to have appropriate strategies in place as well. Then you're also assessing the environment, like where are we wearing masks and how we're going to support them to understand and differentiate. Are you going to wear a mask at home? Or you don't need to wear a mask at home. You might have to wear a mask in school, but you're not wearing a mask in your bubble. So there are loads of different scenarios that they have to adapt to, and it can be quite tricky. And we're not going to address everything in one go. We're going to start nice and slowly. The next component is the motor component as well. Again, from the OT perspective, we will be looking at whether the young person is able to manipulate the loops, whether they are stretchable, whether they can stretch and place it around the face, whether they can manage the loops around the ear, and if you are going for a tying knot, are they able to tie a knot? Are they able to adjust the mask over their face? Is it just moving around everywhere? So loads of things to look at. And then we go into strategies. And as I said, I've put lots of things, but they might all come together. Obviously, we start with, a lot of kids are possibly wearing and have become used to looking at people in masks. However, the idea of putting mask on yourself and putting it for a length of time can be quite tricky and can feel quite uncomfortable. So just introducing the idea of face mask, giving them time to get familiarized with the whole idea of covering your nose, covering your face, covering your mouth, and really putting in context why we need to do that. And a good way to do that is to use lots of social stories. Lots of nice videos on YouTube have come out, which are also very useful. I've put another slide where there are all the links, which I thought are useful, but there are like heaps of resources. So we just want to make sure, you want to make sure to pick up what's useful for your young person. So once you've done that, just involving them in giving them choices. So having different kinds of mask around, different materials, trialing, playing with the mask will be quite nice. Coloring your own mask. Some of the masks can be colored and drawn on, but I think surgical masks, they said you shouldn't be coloring or drawing on. I can't remember why, but I'm pretty sure that surgical masks are the masks they said you shouldn't be writing or drawing on. So in terms of playing, I'm just going to jump to the next slide where there are some pictures and then we will go back. So you can have these superhero theme kind of masks for younger kids. If someone is not used to the idea of having a real mask, or they just don't want to even try it, you can have some printable sheets and just to expose them to the idea of having a mask. You can get them to decorate it on the sheet or to draw, and just to help them slowly desensitize with that idea. You can use their favorite toy in some sort of story, and then you can use social story along with the toy and use very clear, concrete language. Also, of course, you can take help from a speech and language therapist. They can help you write the social stories, and keeping it really clear, really concrete, that by wearing masks, we are protecting other people and other people are protecting us. So really nice and simple. So here are different kinds of masks. Again, I have already said that we just need to think which is the right kind. But something to think is that if it's too loose, it might move around a lot. And if it is too snug, it might have a little bit of friction. So you might want to find the right type of mask for the child. Of course, modeling as adults is really useful. So we might want to model what we are trying to teach the kids, and also share with them how you're feeling about covering your face, because it's really important that kids see adults and peers doing this similar behaviors, and be able to openly share and have a dialogue as to if they are feeling a bit of anxiety around it. Then just to address those anxieties and giving them time to talk about it will be really useful. So I've kind of talked mostly about all the points. Just another one is about using essential oils. So if a particular child is struggling with smell, then or they like some smells, then you can have a little drop of essential oil, but not straight in front of the mask, maybe on the side somewhere, and then they can just have that light smell come through, and it just might calm them down. All right, so here are some of the examples. It can be really simple, like a checklist you can have to make it structured, to make it a normal thing as we do. So, a morning checklist could look like, have you taken your school bag? your lunchbox, shoes on, mask on, ready to go. Let's get in the cab and off we go to the school. All right. I'm saying cab because a lot of our kids in our school come in cabs, but not everyone goes in a cab. Or you can have a little storyboard, or you can have your social story with nice pictures for some kids, which may be more appealing for some kids, and you can explain them the context of wearing a mask. All right, so we have seen these. Okay, so there was another one, which is the DIY mask that I found were, I think I found most of them on a couple of webinars I was attending, and a couple of OTs mentioned this, which I thought was very interesting because you can, someone who's a bit more sensitive around their ear, you can have a little button sewed on their headband or bandana or a cap, as you can see over here, and they just have to put the loop around so it's not touching behind your ear. Or of course, there are the transparent masks which have come out, which are particularly useful for folks who would struggle without facial expression. But I mean, personally, I haven't heard great reviews. I think they fog quite easily, but there are some ones which are anti-fog ones as well. I haven't used them, but you know, I'm sure someone might be out there who can give us more feedback. All right, so moving on to the washing hands. Now, the difference between washing hands and having to cover your face with face covering or face mask has been a completely new behavior that we have all had to establish, get used to it. Literally, you know, every morning I was leaving, going to work, I had to make a forgotten face mask so many times, and it took a while for me to get used to the fact that it needs to always be there with me. Whilst washing hands is something that we have, hopefully we have been doing, all of us, and this is a skill that we teach kids quite a lot, and it's a very sensitive skill as well. So at this point, we are having to really focus on making it more prominent, enhancing the skills as much as possible. So starting again, looking at the sensory components, we are looking at the environment, we're looking at the temperature of the water. So some kids may struggle with different temperatures, so you really will need to make sure that the temperature is right. You will also need to look at the smell and texture of the soap and the noise of the water or tap. So these are very subtle things that sometimes we may not consider a problem for us, but folks having sensory issues can really struggle with this. The next bit could be the motor components. So, you know, washing hands has got several different steps. So you do want to consider, is the child able to sequence rubbing their palms, the back of their hands, between the fingers, around the thumb, you know, in the middle of the palm. So all these steps, are they able to remember? Are they able to follow through without help, and how we can help them? And then also having enough fine motor strength, so enough strength to rub your hands, to open the tap, to rinse your hands, having those movements, which we do very, very naturally. But, you know, some children may need help and extra practice to become better at it. So strategies to support regular hand washing. Obviously, some of the basic ones are, again, putting it into context, using social stories, very, very important. So again, when we are introducing the idea, using visuals, showing videos. Again, normally I would show you videos in the talk that I would do, but I'm not doing anything like that today because we are tight on time. But there are lots of links that I have shared, and hopefully that will help you. Anticipating when they might have to wash hands, and these additional slots that we have had to do now is in the classroom. In one lesson, you're probably having to wash your hands, you know, much more than you were before. So just adding those slots into the visual schedule and using lots of reminders is quite useful. Now, from the sensory point of view, we may want to try fragrance-free soaps. You can carry your own soap if things are not, if the child is really sensitive to any other soap, then you can always carry your own soap. If hand washing is a really difficult skill and hasn't been established, you can use a wet towel and soap, and you can rub it on your hands, and then use a plain wet towel to rinse off the soap and then dry your hand if it's really hard, or have a little bowl of water, plastic bowl of water, and then they can wash their hands in there, which we do a lot in our school. And of course, so the dry soap, I don't know how many would know, but I have used the dry paper soap, which you can use if you don't want, if someone doesn't like the feel of the gel soaps or the hard soap, you can have the paper soap. These are quite cool, and I have used them as a child, and it was funny why we always had them around, but they are really nice. They dissolve when you're washing your hands, and you can carry them, and I think they are fragrance free, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that's another resort to have as well. You can use dry soaps. I have actually put a link for that because I couldn't find it anywhere, so it's on Amazon. And in general, if someone is struggling with tactile activities, you can increase tactile activities during the day, either in school or at home. So you can do fun tactile activities. So you're starting the desensitization process, and actually doing tactile activity will make them wash their hands even more. So you may want to think some slotting in some of their tactile activities during the day. Again, I will give you some loads of examples of activities at the end as we go towards the anxiety part. Now, talking about washing, as I have been, but I just wanted to also raise a point that, of course, we have heard about wash, but is there such a thing as overwashing of hands? And I think there is, because it could be linked to the feeling of anxiety. It is something that at least I have been seeing in some of our children, causing them huge amount of anxiety, and having them to go and wash their hands, or them wanting to wash their hands, and then hands becoming really dry and scaly, and then the kids are really struggling with that. So it's a very tricky situation. It's a very tricky situation to even address, but I just wanted to acknowledge that that's something that we are seeing quite a lot in the kids we are working with. So some of the things just to consider: think and look for triggers. The person is likely to be highly anxious about the current situation. Constant worries and negative thoughts. They may be talking about the same topic constantly, asking you lots of questions about it. Spending excess time in the bathroom. You will see raw hands as some of the pictures over here, and unable to concentrate and participate in daily activities. So as I said, it's a difficult one to balance, because sometimes the questions the kids are asking are actually very relevant. And it's really hard to address that and make them understand. But from my experience, at least, what we are seeing is that the general strategies to look at anxiety and keep their anxiety at low are helping them to not do overwashing. All right, so this is these are, I think, a couple of slides. There are so many resources. I've just put a few of them. You might find quite a lot more. I thought that the free printables were really useful. And the washing poster in Activity Village is good. You'll see the additional social distancing ones, which I thought was a really nice way of introducing it to the kids. And then there are the ones how to teach your child to wear a face mask and The mental health ones are the ones which I'll talk a little bit more when we go into anxiety. All right. Okay, so the third one that we're going to look at is minimize touching on face, mask, things, people. I have also added biting, chewing, and sucking fingers. So these are some things that possibly a lot of you are familiar with. And I just want to say that it can be really hard to address these behaviors. And because these are very automatic. I mean, I think the research says that we all tend to touch our face between 9 to 23 times per hour, which is quite a lot. Without thinking, that's an automatic behavior. And that's something we do. And that could be for various different reasons, from feeling anxious, worried, to just seeking a lot of tactile information. So it can be difficult, and we are possibly not going to eliminate it completely. And sometimes actually it's needed, because it's needed to provide soothing and regulation and calming effect. So what we have to do is to think about redirection rather than just stopping it completely. And of course, during all these times, it might be quite useful to work with your behavior team colleagues, but working with your speech and language therapists, working with your psychodynamic therapists, and take input from them, because it's really it's a matter of teamwork. It's not just one size fits all. All right. So as I said before, we have to look at the individual needs. So we are looking at history of sensory behaviors. Are there any established behaviors? So if they already seek things or information, if the child is already putting things in their mouth, if they have a need to touch everything, this is how they interact and communicate. Touch people. So social distancing will become our first kind of point of teaching if they have this need to touch people and touch different things. Again, putting things or objects in mouth, putting fingers in mouth, chewing or biting regularly. All right. And then also looking at any sort of anxiety triggers, which you might notice. So as I said, before we, especially for this particular thing, before we apply anything, we do need to look at the trends and patterns of this behavior, because a lot of times, especially having been worked in a school setting for more than 7 years now, what we have noticed is that these behaviors come and go, and they can happen when the child is frustrated, anxious, happy as well. So they can happen many different times. And we do need to therefore look at the trends and patterns so we can provide them the best strategy to appropriately get this sensory information. So as a lot of you probably would know about use of the chew buddy or chew tool or chewy toy, whatever we can call it, are a good way to give that sensory information. What they have found quite useful to keeping your hands busy from not touching your face is object manipulation. So just having, like, a pen or small sensory objects to fiddle around, which can be quite discreet, which are not distracting as well. So again, you might have to try and see what works better for the child. There are so many options out there, so just bear in mind that not everything is going to work for all kids. So just finding that right little tool. It doesn't need to be a sensory toy. It could be a blue tack. It could be a little rubber band. It could be just a very subtle, small object that they need in their hand. We all probably need in our hands sometimes to just manipulate with something. Regarding the chewing and the biting aspect, you can use a sugar-free chewing gum. Apparently, I'm always worried about saying anything that has to do with food, because of the high sugar content, but apparently there are sugar-free ones. And the Dentistry Association does say they are safe. So yeah. Of course, being very careful of allergies as well. So just being careful of individual needs. But sucking a hard candy, hard food for giving that sort of oral input is really useful. But with food, the problem is satiation. So you need to be careful that it's slotted in, structured during the day, but you're not constantly using foods. Sometimes with the older kids that I have worked, and they have been 17 and 16 years old, and they do have a need to chew, and they use their chew buddy. It has been useful to actually sit and have a chat with them to discuss, wearing a face mask and how we can address their need to chew. And they have been really good, and they have been able to have that one-to-one conversation. They have been able to discuss, and we have been able to actually problem solve together. So even that can work if you think you have that sort of relationship with the child, and you want to look at problem solving together. Right. So these are some of the general strategies. I'm not going to go in detail. I have actually shared the links already, but what the particular link of touching your face, this is a YouTube link of a clinical psychologist who talks, it's a long one, it's 11 minutes, I think, but he talks about a range of different strategies to redirecting touching your face or putting things in mouth. So I thought it was really useful, and it's useful for every one of us, and it might help you to think of some of the strategies. Okay, so here are some of the examples of a social story or a visual story for kids. This one is where there is more text, where the child was able to read it. So I thought it was a good example if you're using something which has more text in it. You may already know twinkle.co.uk. It's a good website. They have come up with lots and lots to support kids with some visual aids to help in school and at home. So you might want to check that out. You can make an account, and there are free resources available as well. Then this is an example of a hygiene checklist. So yes, I didn't say that. So obviously, if someone is using a chewy toy, a chewy necklace, a chewy bangle, anything, what is important is we have to also teach them the additional part of looking after that. And as an OT, I'm sure that we all have, at least I do have a big struggle in teaching those things. So we created this chewy hygiene checklist, and this is before COVID. And it did work really well for I think it was a 16-year-old, how to remember to look after his his chewy necklace, and where he could find it. So he was more independent in using it, but also using it appropriately. So oftentimes he had to read the checklist. He was reminded first thing in the morning, in the afternoon, at the end of the day. And once it became an automatic thing, we removed the checklist. It wasn't always there. As soon as he was developing the independent behaviors, then we just took it off because he didn't need it. So it's better to fade that visual prompt as soon as the child is becoming independent. All right, just going to keep a check on the time. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so if you're still here, the last part is about anxiety. So just as a reminder, and I'm absolutely sure that we have all been anxious, and especially in the last 1 year, and kind of understand how it feels to be anxious. So anxiety is an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, feeling worried. Doesn't say negative thoughts, but negative thoughts and physical changes like increased blood pressure. But we do know there are lots of other physical changes that we do experience with anxiety. Now, in children, it's not always very clear when they are feeling anxious, especially if we are working in a school setting, or it's hard to pick up that they might be behaving in a certain way because they are feeling anxious. So there's some signs to watch out for. If the child is seeking reassurance, if they are complaining some psychosomatic issues such as headaches, stomach aches, there could be skin rashes, they could feel nausea, they could complain they can't breathe. So all these things would fit in. Continuous mood changes, a lot of ups and downs, trouble falling asleep. Separation anxiety, of course, after spending a long time at home in a nice safe bubble, it's very, very hard to go back to school and feel okay, feel safe. Unable to concentrate, loop of negative thoughts, avoiding everyday activities and self-care, and becoming tearful really easily. So, coping with anxiety. I think a lot of us have already probably established this, but just a good way to remind us is a structured day and increasing predictability is always helpful, especially in times of uncertainty like this. So even if we are not able to control everything and we are being put in a situation where things are changing overnight, we can try to keep structure in the day and for a child have that predictability what's happening during the day or during the week as much as possible. So having visual timetables even at home are quite useful. You don't need to have it just up. If someone is used to having a tablet or a phone, they can have that visual timetable on there in the calendar. That also helps. Avoiding catastrophic thinking. So catastrophic thinking is, starting with some sort of negative thought and zooming through with speed straight to the worst outcome ever possible. And I myself experienced it last month when I was diagnosed with COVID, and then I lived with a vulnerable person and they got diagnosed with COVID, and immediately my head, I was just like, oh my God, they're going to die now because they have COVID. Now, what they say with catastrophic thinking, and I have got it here, is that to the outside world, it might seem like an illogical leap going from one to the other. But if you break it down, it is often not a totally implausible scenario, although it may be highly unlikely. So for me, I really thought that this is how I experienced. And there is a link at the bottom here, which is autism.org.uk, which is quite useful. It talks about autism and catastrophic thinking. We see that quite a lot in our school, and there are ways to address that as well. It is linked to feeling anxiety. It is one form of anxiety manifesting itself. Another way could be to minimize social media and news, or keeping that sort of balance so we are not overexposed to all sorts of stories going out. I mean, we were supposed to feel really well about 2021, but then kind of taking a step back. But really breaking it down helps to see, what is going on, and minimizing and thinking carefully what you're reading and what sort of articles you want to follow through. Sometimes it helps to just agree that I'm going to look at a 6 o'clock news, or, share with kids an update about what's going on probably every 2 days, rather than just reading and going through everything. Relying on routine is great, as we talked, but also talking about future changes which may come from time to time. Just having that little bit of flexibility that there might be changes coming quite soon. And then I've added well-being activities and well-being groups. Now, this is something that we do in our school in general. It's this amazing idea that was introduced by one of the teachers in our school, and I thought it was great. That the kids come into school first thing, no one goes, they put their bags and then they go to their well-being activities, which could be bespoke activities. So they could be physical activities like they have chosen running or boxing or basketball. Some of them might go for yoga. Some may just go for a walk. Some may be doing a bit more reading without having to do anything with other people, just calm. Some might be listening to music. So you can think about and again slot in that well-being activity in your day. Then you've got your mindfulness activities, which are lovely. I will go through some examples, which again, I have been doing with some of the kids in our school, and they have responded really well. And they're really simple, fun activities for kids. But just teaching this idea of being present and being aware of what's going on. All right. We're very close to finishing, so just give me a couple more minutes. Of course, the importance of talking about what's going on is really important. So what we have done in our school is giving a lot of time and space for kids to actually address and give them time to talk about it. We're lucky to have a very strong talking therapy team in our school. But it doesn't need to be just that. It could be a nominated person, a nominated time that they can use. The speech and language therapists in our school have established zones of regulation system, and kids use that to communicate how they're feeling, especially the kids who really struggle understanding their own feelings. So this is a nice visual way to use and start that conversation. I have added a little worry jar as well that you could have. So again, kind of almost scheduling the time for them to start to talk about their worries rather than talking it throughout the day. It really helps them to know, oh yeah, 1 o'clock, I have got that time when I can really talk about everything. And this is when they can hold their feelings inside. If they can't hold the feelings inside, yes, of course, we're going to give them support and time to talk. And another example could be using mind mapping, another visual example, which are very, very useful, are being used by some of our amazing teaching assistants, and they are finding it very useful visual way to problem solve or reflect on something that has gone wrong and address on any sort of anxiety triggers and really break it down to see, you know, is it that big problem, or actually you might be thinking that it's a massive problem. I really like mind maps because they work beautifully. So in general, some calming, soothing activities, very much based on mindfulness. This is where my yoga hat comes on. So I do use quite a lot of sensory art. Try to use breathing techniques. This is a great one. Take 5 works very well, has a lovely little tactile effect to it, but also teaches what is going in, coming out, going in, coming out. We have, going to go through the last slide quickly because I know I have gone off time. Right, the last one is the gratitude tree. So that has been, again, a really wonderful activity just to move away from thinking negative and breaking that negative pattern. We have been able to change that, and thinking about gratitude has really helped a lot of our kids to think about how many things are positive right now and be able to go and revisit it as well. So that's a lovely strategy for you to try. And lastly, just to say that close the conversation with this slide for all of us is that a lot is going on, but be gentle with yourself, and you're doing the best you can. So hopefully you found it useful. Thank you very much. And I will probably pass over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Mayuri. So much information there. And just to reassure anyone that didn't see Bethan's comment in the chat, we have recorded this and it will go up onto our YouTube channel, and there'll be a link to that from our webinar page on our website. So we'll try our best to get all of the links as well, if we can, into the description of the YouTube video, because there's so much there, and I think it's been probably hard for people to track on the chat, but really great. And we've had a few questions in, quite a few of them I think you answered as you went along, but we've had one here about hand washing from someone who has got a son who loves water a lot, and I think she's struggling with the fact that, you know, he goes to wash his hands and then you've lost 20 minutes of him playing with water, and lots of soap and water are lost in the process. So what would you recommend to that mother?
I think well, I'll try to answer based on the information I know, because I would want to know a bit more. I think timers are quite useful. Having a song in the background is sometimes quite useful. Explaining the child using social story that this is the amount of time that we can spend in washing hands, and probably aligning something more motivational after might be. I know it's really hard to think about these things. You're not structuring every single minute of your day, but using timers, using songs, maybe alternative ways of washing hands, maybe hand gel, maybe doesn't need to go to the bathroom every time, or having the little bowl of water and soapy water so he can wash up and then he moves straight on to the next activity. But I think yeah, I hope this helps. It might help if I know a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's great. And overuse of hand sanitizer, again, someone's mentioned here that they've got a student that they support who really loves the kind of the feel and texture of hand sanitizer. How would you limit that use?
I think maybe it's worth revisiting, depending on obviously the cognitive ability and the age of the child, the function of use of hand sanitizer, why we need to use the hand sanitizer. So maybe just having that chat with the child using either a whiteboard and a marker or a story, and then just trying to understand, like, or trying to probably highlight the fact that we're using it to clean our hands and we don't have to use it so many times. And if it's a sensory thing that they do enjoy the gel, then maybe think about having an additional tactile activities during the day. So they are getting that sort of tactile input, which is similar to sensory. So either it could be finger painting, or it could be playing with shaving foam, Orbeez. So there are loads of tactile ideas that can be used.
Great. And someone's mentioned actually in the chat about hand sanitizer sprays as well, if you want to kind of try using that instead.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Great. So someone's asked here about strategies for helping a young person through COVID testing, so the whole throat and nasal swabs. Not very nice for any of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, I am on the mass testing team as well, and we do have to start off again with social stories. I know I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but it will need to start with the idea of understanding why they need to be tested. So starting with a simple social story might be a good point with some pictures. And some of the strategies which I am actually now in a process to make for our own kids is to see whether you can use adult or peer modeling. So there are some videos on YouTube which have been, I think, made by DFE, and they do show some kids being tested. And, you know, it's nice for the kids to see that the child who's being tested just after that has this itchy kind of facial expression, and then they are fine. So just to have some sort of examples, or if they have older sibling who have being tested can share their experience with them. I mean, I'm saying all these things, but really it is consent-based testing as well. So if at all this is not going to be possible, the child should not be forced to be tested, because it isn't a very nice feeling. So we can try as much as possible in terms of having a favorite squishy toy, have music in the background, but at the end of the day, it's an invasive process. So at that point, the child may refuse to do it. So you can try all the calming strategies for the kids, but if they can't do it, then we're just going to have to accept that they can't.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point on that point. I know we discussed before this webinar, Mayuri, around the face masks and the fact that the government has said that those with a disability or where they feel they physically can't put on the mask or find it extremely difficult can be exempt. And I know that obviously there's a lot of social pressure to wear masks, and I think a lot of autistic people are wearing masks when and children obviously when it's really difficult to do so, but the government does have that kind of information on their site. I know that we've shared a link in the chat to that. We can reshare it maybe now, and also there's some exemption cards if you are struggling and you want to kind of tell people why you or your child aren't wearing a mask. You can print those off from the government website, or I think you can download them onto your mobile as well to flash them. So.
And you can have a lanyard as well, I think, with the yellow flowers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great. I think we've got another question around someone whose child's just really worried about sort of all the death rates and things like that, quite obsessive over the numbers. And really worried about sort of elderly relatives and things. What would you suggest in that case?
Yeah, I mean, again, it will be useful to know how old they are, but either ways, what the approach that we have taken is I think generally in education settings is that we have reduced the demands on the kids and increased the activities which will be more positive and motivational to do during the day. So and also giving them time to, as we said, having those worry jars and giving them time to talk about it, but being quite factual has sometimes helped as well, that indeed these are statistics, and you know, if there isn't any family bereavement, but it has been happening, you know, outside, then just for them to understand that these things are happening and they are present, but they are not happening to them, or just pointing out very, very clearly that, you know, mom and dad are doing well and we're healthy, we're safe in the house, and you're here and you're safe, and we have again going back to we have to do everything to keep ourselves safe, is washing our hands, using the sanitizer, or keeping ourselves safe by social distancing. So I think keeping it very concrete, but slotting in worry time is much better if they keep using the entire day in reassurance. And it's a sign, if they're constantly talking about it, it could be a sign that they are very anxious. But doing lots of, and I strongly say to people to use loads of mindfulness activities for kids. And there are some lovely books and lovely, I can send you some links later on. I haven't added it here, but they are helping really young kids. And I've been working with 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and they do get it. They get the idea of being aware and being present and how I'm feeling. And you will do it through fun activities. So this hopefully can help reduce that sort of anxiety.
Great. Okay, yeah, send those links and we'll see if we can add them to the YouTube description as well. Thank you. Just one final question. I think we can just about squeeze one more in. Yeah, I think you've covered sort of chewing quite a bit, but someone's just said around general help to limit hair chewing specifically.
General help, you said?
Hair chewing.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well, I think we we will need to look at the trends and patterns when that happens as well. So because chewing can happen, as I said, at any time, and whether a lot of times I've seen like hair chewing can happen when they might be either bored or trying to concentrate on something. So, and it's an automatic thing as well. So redirection will be the way to go. Again, introducing and replacement behaviors. So again, thinking about what sort of chewy item will be appropriate for this person, whether or keeping their hands busy with something else, whether redirecting it using a sensory toy or something to manipulate and something to fiddle might be quite useful. But then that needs to be introduced based on the child's cognitive level, introduced using a visual story or having a chat with the child and discussing that this is the strategy because, you know, chewing hair is not safe, is not socially appropriate. So let's find out what we can use, something which is more appropriate and more useful for you.
Great. Amazing. Well, we managed to fit in quite a lot of questions there. Thank you, Mayuri. And thank you for everyone that sent in questions or put comments into the chat, and for everyone that joined us today. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're running quite a few of these webinars, so we obviously want to hear from you, sort of potentially suggestions for future webinars, and also just your feedback on this webinar. We always want to look to improve the content we put out. As I said, it will be recorded, it will be on YouTube, and you can find that if you just search for webinar on our website. You'll find the webinar page, and we'll put a link to that. Hopefully by tomorrow afternoon that will be up. I'd love anyone to join the Autistica network if you're not already a member. So this is, it's free to join. You join and receive emails, updates about the latest research, events like this one, and also opportunities to take part in studies, so to share your experiences with researchers so that we can improve the lives of autistic people. And finally, if you've really enjoyed the webinar today, if you found it useful, we would love you to consider making a small donation to Autistica. Obviously, it's a difficult time for charities, and we need to continue our work now more than ever. I think the effect of the pandemic on the autism community is really starting to show. So this information that we're putting out, as well as the research that we're doing to improve the future for autistic people, is really important. So if you can even just donate sort of £5 to say thank you today, there's a link in the chat, or just hit the donate button on our website. But finally, thank you so much, Mayuri. That was a really, really valuable presentation, really practical stuff. And I know we've had lots of positive comments coming through on the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.